As far as popularity in the 90s goes, Power Rangers is in the cream of the crop. They were definitely up there in coolness, around the same level as the Ninja Turtles. They had 4 games for the Super Nintendo, 2 are what you would expect, some good old-fashioned ass-beating action, while one is a fighter, a Street Fighter 2 clone, and the other is a racer, a Super Mario Kart clone. Today, we're going to be looking at the 2 action games, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, which came later. You would be amazed at the differences and trade-offs between these 2 games. Overall, it's fair to say both games are good, but also have reasons that hold them back from being great. The truth is that if you combine these 2 games, you really would come away with something great. Like to the point that it makes me sad that these 2 games can't just make a child together. If you haven't heard of these games before, they could be summed up in about 5 seconds. You run to the right, you fight through bad guys, morph, fight more bad guys, and then a boss fight. Not a bad thing to keep it so simple, but in regards to the differences between these 2 games, there are lots of things to mention, so let's jump right in. There are many reasons for why these games are considered good. There are great graphics, solid control, exciting music, and constant fighting action. This is our first difference between the 2. The fighting in the first game is fast-paced, the enemies move quickly and won't leave you alone until you've taken them out. As you attack by pressing Y, each ranger has their own unique combo. If you pull off a combo, it does enough damage to take out most enemies. When you get close to a putty, your character can throw them, and one flying body can hit another, which is pretty cool. In the sequel, you only have one attack, and they got rid of the combos completely. Since this makes it harder to land multiple hits in a row, the enemies do take fewer hits to destroy in general. You also can't throw an enemy anymore. I would prefer that they left in combos, or at least a 1-2 punch combo. There are a couple special moves like holding up on your D-pad to hit with a big uppercut or kick. They don't do more damage though, it just gives you some space. I should also mention a detail about the fighting that is purely aesthetic but still really bothers me. The developers did a good job making each ranger have unique looking attacks in their pre-morph stage. However, it's like they tried too hard to do this because some characters look really dumb when they fight. It's less obvious and flows better in the first game since they have combos, but in the sequel, Tommy is the only person in the whole group that can throw a real punch. I mean, nothing wrong with throwing some palms, I guess, that's fine, but Billy fights everybody like a complete puss. Kimberly slaps enemies to death, but the weirdest of all is Rocky backfisting literally everybody. I mean, why would anybody fight like this? Fighting does get better across the board when the Rangers morph. Which brings us to the next difference. In the first game, each level is treated like 2 halves. You fight through bad guys as your normal self until you meet the end of the level boss. This is where you morph, your life bar refills, and you fight a quick onslaught before the second half. When you morph, fighting is more exciting just because you're finally a ranger and have a weapon to increase your range. The weapons don't seem to do any more damage though. You also have access to a couple more kinds of grab and throw moves too. So morphing is planned and kept simple in this game. Morphing in the sequel is done in a more clever way. When you kill enemies, they drop little bolts of power to fill up your meter. Some bolts give you more power than others too. This motivates you to kill more putties to get that meter full quicker. Once it's full and glowing, you can then press X at any point in order to morph. And they made morphing really awesome in this game. When you morph, it clears enemies on the screen and fills up your health. Once you've morphed, your standing attacks are actually twice as strong as they were, but you don't have a weapon yet. That's because in order to fight with your weapon in this game, you have to fill the power meter again. Once it's full, you can do super damage with this attack, but you only have it for a limited amount of time. The power meter is also used for special attacks when you're in both forms. In your pre-morph stage, it uses some of your power meter as long as it's not full, and they're pretty interesting. Your meter has to be full as a ranger in order to use this special attack. They're really badass, clear the screen, and do lots of damage. The drawback is, of course, you wasted your weapon time for it. I think the first game handled its special move in a better way by separating it, referring to it as a bomb. You get one when you morph and can find a replacement or 2 to pick up in the second half of the level. The third difference is the single versus double plane style of the levels. In the first game, what you see is what you get, running left to right on a single plane. The sequel adds another plane that you can jump or flip to by pressing L or R. This adds a little bit more depth as some enemies jump over to you from the other plane, or you have the freedom to avoid an enemy if you want. And also, some obstacles are dodged this way. The double plane is not present for the entirety of the game, plenty of sections where you just have to take one path. The double plane works especially well in a certain mode that wasn't available in the first game, which brings us to our fourth difference. In the first game, it's unfortunately just one player, which is too bad. When you have a game based on a team of heroes, it's sad for the player to only choose one character. It's like only being able to choose one Ninja Turtle, or just Batman in a game called Batman and Robin. It feels like false advertising. In the sequel, you can finally play with a friend, and it's a pretty decent co-op experience, fun to tear through levels, navigate obstacles in certain sections together, before that exciting boss fight. Speaking of playable characters, the fifth difference is that they let you play as Tommy in this game. There's nothing really that special about him, aside from being the only character that looks like they know how to fight. I mean, one other thing is he does a back handspring instead of a backflip like everybody else for some reason. The sixth difference is your health. In the first game, your life bar is super big. Enemies don't do a ton of damage to you either. You have at least around 10 hits for it to run out. You also can fill it past the top, like if you pick up health while you're already healthy, you can see your bar change color as it overfills. This makes the game very forgiving. The sequel adjusted this, and it definitely makes the game more challenging. You only have 5 health blocks, and the game is stingier about handing out health. So you have to be more careful in order to keep your lives. With dying in mind, the first game is not only easier to survive in, but it gives you a password at the end of every level. The sequel, on the other hand, has true game overs and no password saves, so it's definitely harder to beat. Another detail about life bars is that the bosses are given one, whereas they didn't display one in the first game. While we're on the topic of boss fights, the Power Rangers make them really fun and cool in both games. You have to give the edge though to the sequel, because damn, some of these fights look downright amazing, especially as you get further along. The seventh difference is how the enemies behave. In the first game, as I mentioned, there's a faster pace. The enemies have a faster speed to them, even though it doesn't make them any harder to defeat. It's also more obvious that the putties are coming to attack you and not just passing by. However, in the next game, some of these enemies behave like they could not give less of a shit. As silly as this is though, I do have to say the enemies have a better variety in the sequel. Some shoot their guns, duck and kick, jump and kick, swing a sword, and other kinds for a change of pace. The eighth and last difference is a big one. So the sequel was able to bring us a few things that the first game didn't, such as a 2-player co-op, White Ranger, and a better morphing system, but of all things, you know what they took away? The first game shocked kids everywhere after 5 levels of beat-em-up action to witness this. Oh yeah, you know what this means, it's Megazord Time. This is an awesome change in the gameplay to really deliver on the full Power Rangers experience. There are special moves that you can execute as your special meter grows, a decent variety of attacks, including a rushing sword slash. It's moments like this that just make you proud of the game for going that extra mile. The sequel, as you may have guessed by now, unfortunately has no Megazord fighting at all, and you can see one in the credits. Such a tease. As you can see, there are lots of differences and trade-offs between these two games, and I bet you also can see how much potential there was for an amazing Power Rangers game on the Super Nintendo, or even the N64 if they would have made a better game in the same style as something like Mischief Makers instead of whatever this was supposed to be. It would have been perfect if they brought together the combos, special moves, superior enemies and boss fights, the morphing system, and the 2-player co-op into an amazing package that would still be considered a gem today. But either way, be assured that both games are fun, with nice graphics and amazing soundtracks. Neither are very expensive, and plus you can play through each game in around 40 minutes if you don't die too much. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this compare and contrast video on Power Rangers for the SNES, and I also hope to see you for my next review.